Welcome back to the weekend primetime. We start this hour with the Trump administration's increasingly cruel tactics in their immigration crackdown, turning Halloween into a night of very real terror. The New York Times reports, quote, federal immigration agents fanned out across Chicago and its North Shore suburbs on Halloween, chasing suspects through front yards, driving SUVs onto sidewalks, and using chemical agents during confrontations with furious residents. The Times goes on, quote, several people, including at least one woman who said that she was a U.S. citizen, were arrested after appearing to interfere with immigration operations. This all comes just days after ICE agents deployed tear gas in a Chicago neighborhood, minutes before the start of an annual Halloween parade. Illinois Governor Pritzker slammed DHS, demanding it pause immigration arrests until after Halloween. Secretary Kristi Noem declined. Chicago wasn't alone in dealing with all of Trump's cruel immigration crackdown actions this week. An independent Los Angeles media outlet reported seeing people wearing Halloween masks in the same area where DHS has been staging since immigration raids got started. The outlet, the LA Taco, requested comment from the DHS on the use of Halloween masks by these federal agents. The response they got, happy Halloween. Joining us now is Veronica Cardinas, former ICE Assistant Chief Counsel. She also leads Humanigration, an organization that educates immigration lawyers about the rights of non-citizens. Veronica, it's great to have you back here on the show. In your view, as you've watched not just what we've seen over the last 24 hours, but over the last several weeks, this ramp up, these aggressive blitzes, Chicago and elsewhere, do you believe at this stage we're looking at something that is cruelty being the point?
Yes, absolutely. What we're seeing now, especially comments like Happy Halloween, to something that should be very disturbing. Officers, they're calling themselves law enforcement. They take oaths to uphold the law, and they're making fun. They're using this as just another tactic to really terrorize not only non-citizens, but Americans as well. This is no longer an immigration debate. This is really our democracy at a test.
Well, you served as an ICE prosecutor for a decade during the Obama years. And could you talk a bit about using tear gas that close to a children's parade, would that have been an acceptable use of force? And what about the standard of just objective reasonableness of the proportionality of all of the force that they're coming in with around minors, around children?
Right, and that's a really good point, because this isn't something that we would see. This is an extraordinary circumstance right now. And what's complicating this more is that Customs and Border Protection, that's usually at the border or the ports of entry, that are given extraordinary authorities. They're allowed to do roving patrols. They're allowed to stop someone with no suspicion at all if they're suspecting that they're just crossing through the southern border or at the airport without proper documentation. They're bringing that style into our backyards, into our schools, our hospitals, our churches, and that is not acceptable.
Well, we've also seen a major leadership change in recent days where they've actually purposely pulled Border Patrol leaders into further leadership positions within DHS, sort of swapping people who are traditionally part of ICE with Border Patrol. And for people who aren't familiar, as you said, not only do they have a sort of different set of tactics and training along the border, not normally brought into the interior, but they also have a background of sometimes sort of questionable ethics and more aggression among that group than we've seen in other parts of the agency.
Exactly. And CBP, because they operate in desert lands, right, there's a lot of open space. There's not a lot of people. If they commit a violation against a non-citizen who's immediately deported back, there's not that accountability there. They're not raising their rights. But that type of style enforcement is not acceptable in the interior when there are non-citizens, there are Americans. We're a mixed status nation right now, and they're using the same level of tactics despite status.
You still have friends, yes, who are in the agency or you used to work in ICE. What is your sense of the morale there, how people who have been there for a long time feel about what's going on? I feel like one of the questions that comes up again and again is, how can the people who are there do these things. I understand that there are new recruits for whom the cruelty may be the point, who are attracted to the sort of aggressiveness that Trump has been promoting. But presumably there are civil servants who have been there for a long time who got into this work for very different reasons.
Right. And I think that there are many of us in that situation. I was one of them. That started in 2010. And I really did take the oath to uphold the Constitution. It wasn't about deporting. It was about enforcing the law and giving measured discretion to those who deserved it and to those bad criminals that did deserve to have ICE deport them, right? But that was played out in a court of law. And right now, it doesn't seem like there's that measured discretion. Assistant chief counsels are told what to do. They can't really say much in court proceedings except that they're opposing everything. The attorney general, who can actually rewrite law, they're given that authority. So if an immigration judge or the board, which is the appellate body, decides something, the attorney general could just take that decision and override it because it's the wrong one, because it doesn't favor deportation, and that's what they're doing. And so having the law stacked in that way, where trial attorneys are going to court, prosecutors are going to court, but their job is already done for them. These cases are already prejudged.
So why do people stay in these jobs, do you think?
They stay because they are, these are their careers. These are something that they've built up to do. And as a government servant myself, I could say that that decision is very difficult to make when your identity is tied to your job. There was a trajectory. I'm going to start as an assistant chief counsel. I might become a judge. I can move around in the government. The government is not that way anymore. But to wrap around and try to get another job, that does take time when people have families to support.
Is some of it also that I can imagine people wonder, well, if I leave this job, who's going to take my job?
I've wondered that too.
And when you look at some of the people that they're bringing in who seem to openly celebrate violence and aggression, you can imagine they'd say, well, it might help if I stay in this seat.
Well, now you're on the outside and you're advising clients seeking permanent status. You're an immigration lawyer. There have been horrifying stories about men and women who show up to their appointments with ICE and instead they're arrested. President Trump vowed during his campaign, "I will be your retribution." And 10 months into his second presidency, he's wasting no time. That retribution is now targeting 2 federal prosecutors who were put on leave this week by the Justice Department for requesting a stiff sentence for a January 6th rioter who was pardoned by Trump. He was later arrested after turning up armed near President Obama's home in 2023. In the memo, prosecutors described him as having been among the mob of rioters on January 6th. And that didn't seem to sit well with the DOJ, which, after placing them on leave, issued a new memo removing references to January 6th. Joining us now is Jonathan Karl, the chief Washington correspondent for ABC News and author of the new book, Retribution, Donald Trump and the Campaign That Changed America. It's in stores now. So, Jonathan, this is yet another example of Trump weaponizing the DOJ. What's your takeaway from the ongoing retribution campaign? Did you anticipate that it was going to be at this level, this stamina, so constant, and so many different targets?
I mean, I called the book Retribution. I decided to call it that the day after Trump won election, because as I was preparing, I knew I was going to write a book about the transition and what was going to come after the election. And I saw that everything that animated Donald Trump's presidential campaign from the very first days that he announced it was this effort of not just to get vindication, not just to come back after he had left the White House in disgrace in 2021, but to get even with his enemies. So, yes, I did anticipate this. And also, by the way, as that story you just mentioned vividly illustrates, the effort to entirely rewrite the history of January 6th.
See here that voices in ICE, ex-ICE officers, prosecutors, whatever, they are speaking out and saying what we're doing is wrong. And look, I want to be clear. I actually don't think ICE should exist. And I think ICE is a level of law enforcement that even if you're not a defund the police, ICE should not exist. It is, in my view, fundamentally a broken organization, root and stem. And I gotta be honest, the kind of people who go to work for ICE are probably not ideologically progressive. Again, I don't want to stereotype, but my point is, this is an organization that should be very comfortable with a Republican administration, doing very Republican things, and frankly be comfortable with traditional police overstepping, which has existed under Republican and Democratic presidents. The fact that they feel the need to speak out showcases how bad it is. The fact that even the sorts of people who work in the sorts of organizations that are stereotypically right-wing leaning, if not fully right-wing, are saying enough is enough is a bad sign. Again, these are prosecutors. These are people who want as a job to lock folks up. And again, some people deserve to be locked up, but it takes a particular kind of person to go work for these organizations, I feel. And they are ones that are predisposed to, I think, side with law enforcement and give law enforcement the benefit of the doubt. This is not the ACLU. This is not a civil liberties organization. This is not a group of defense attorneys who defend migrant peoples and defend victims of police brutality, who would have, I guess, a predisposition to distrust law enforcement. And yet, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing it. We're seeing voices from within the DOJ, within the FBI, within ICE, within Customs, border security. They are speaking out. And they're doing it despite the fact that they probably lean to the right more often than not, because it's one thing to be a conservative, and it's one thing to be a Constitution-ripping MAGA Republican.